Welcome. If you're a woman who has a sense that there's more out there for you, you're in the right place. I'm Whitney Baker, host of the Electric Ideas podcast. Somewhere along the line of work and kids, life carried on, but I lost track of my truth. I'm on a reflective journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. Each week, I interview a woman who is lighting her own path and offering others hope. Before our conversation ends, we'll share a reflective question for you to explore. Sometimes all we need is a jolt, a fresh idea, an aha moment that connects us to a sense of possibility. This, my friends, is what I call an electric idea. Welcome back to Electric Ideas. Today's guest is Krista St-Germain, and wow, I'm really glad I found her. You guys, you're going to want to listen to this. Everybody has gone through grief or known someone who has experienced grief or continues to grieve. And the honest truth is, we don't know how we're going to feel until we're on the other side. And when we're the one watching a loved one go through grief, it's really hard to know how to show up. So Krista St-Germain is a grief expert. She's a widow herself. She's a mom. She's host of the Widowed Mom podcast. When her husband was killed by a drunk driver in 2016, Krista's life was completely shattered. She'd been at a really happy point, and it could have been really easy to just believe that her best days were behind her. Thankfully, Krista discovered life coaching and the concept of post-traumatic growth, and she was able to move forward and create a future she could really get excited about again. Now she coaches and teaches other widows so they can love life again too. And while this is a super sensitive topic, it felt so nourishing to connect with her because, again, we all know somebody who's grieving or have experienced grief ourselves, and all we want to do is show up in the right way during those times. And I know this conversation will help you feel empowered to do that. So with that, let's drop into this super meaningful conversation. Krista, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
It's such an important topic, grief. And I know it can be a paralyzing topic that not everybody wants to talk to.
Yeah.
So I want to start with, what's something you wish everyone who hasn't experienced a significant loss of a loved one, what's one thing you hope that people could understand?
Yeah. One thing I hope people would understand is that feelings aren't problems, right? If we could make that one switch, then how others experience grief and how we support ourselves in grief and how we support those we love in grief would be so different, right? Because most of us have been taught that feelings are problems, maybe implicitly, right? But we've been taught that the idea is to be happy all the time. And so when we aren't happy and when those we love aren't happy, right, or are in pain, then it's only natural for us to think that there's a problem that needs to be fixed. That is the exact opposite of what we need when we're experiencing grief. We're not broken and we don't need to be fixed, right? We want somebody to witness what we're experiencing, to love us as we experience it, to help support us in the experience of it, but not to try to fix us. And so if we could shift from feelings are problems to feelings are just experiences to allow, grief would get a lot easier.
What a beautiful place to open, because I feel like it's a tough position to be in when you know someone's had a traumatic loss and you want to help them. And I think it's human nature to want to fix things and make it better. And you're kind of arguing that this isn't something to be fixed.
Yeah.
So what can we do to show up for that friend or loved one who's experienced loss?
Yeah. I think actually it becomes a whole lot easier when we decide that feelings aren't problems to be fixed, because so much of the anxiety and discomfort that we feel when we're watching someone in grief is sometimes this pressure we're putting on ourselves that we don't even know we're doing it of, oh, this is uncomfortable for me. How do I make them feel better? Right. So that I can kind of make myself feel better. And so when we can drop that, then we can just be with people as they feel, and we won't be searching for the right thing to say, right? We won't be searching for the thing to say that we think will make them feel better, because we're in a place where we know that's no longer our goal. And this is what can be so frustrating to people who are experiencing grief, is that they're being told by other people well-intended things that fall very flat. So the cliches and platitudes of, well, they're in a better place, or at least they're no longer suffering. Or, you know, in my case as a widow, well, you're young, you'll find someone else, right? They would want you to be happy. Don't be sad. It'll be okay, right? All of these things that presume that where you are is a problem and are trying to get you somewhere else. And when we can drop that, then we can be with someone with, this sucks. I'm so sorry this happened to you. I love you so much, right? I'm here with you. And we can peacefully be with them. And it doesn't feel like work because we're not trying to change anything. We're just being with what is.
Yes. And I know that you mentioned you are a widow. I'm aware your husband was killed unexpectedly in 2016. Tell us a little bit about where you were in your kind of what was going on in your life when that happened.
Yeah, I was on an emotional high. So I was 40. He was my second marriage, and my first marriage had not ended all that well. And so he was kind of the redemption story for me, the proof that amazing relationships are possible. So I was just on a complete high. And we were coming back from a trip that we had taken together, and we had driven separately, and I had a flat tire, and we pulled over on the side of the interstate, and he wanted to change the tire. He did not want to wait on AAA because he was stubborn. And I didn't insist that we call them. And a driver that we later found out had both meth and alcohol in his system, broad daylight, did not see us, did not see our hazard lights, and just crashed right into the back of his car. And he was trying to get in my trunk to get the spare tire and trapped him in between the two cars. So I went from this complete high of life is amazing, I'm so glad I'm finally where I am, to, oh my gosh, I think I'm never going to be happy again. My best days are surely behind me. That was as good as it's going to get in just less than, 24 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I just feel that. And I didn't know you were there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was on the side of the road. Fortunately, though, I think the universe was looking out for me a little bit. I wasn't actually looking. I was looking at my phone to text my daughter. She was 12 at the time, and I was letting her know that we would be late. So, I actually really do appreciate that I wasn't looking at the actual accident. I was looking at my phone when it happened. Doesn't make it, honestly, a whole lot better or anything, but it maybe a little bit.
So you shared with us that, people kind of with well intentions, and I'm sure you went through this yourself, and I feel like that's why you can speak to this so powerfully, that people had kind of all these good intentions and things that weren't so helpful that they said to you. What did help during that time for you?
One of the things that really helped was that he and I had actually worked together at the same company. And so it actually really helped. In some ways, it was harder because I had to go to the spaces that we had a lot of memories in. And so there wasn't really that respite. For some people, going back to work is a respite from grief. For me, it really wasn't. And so there can be upsides and downsides to that. But it was actually really helpful for me to be surrounded by people who loved him as much as I did. Right? Because they would tell stories about him. They would talk about him. They missed him too. And so I just felt a lot more supported. But, there are a few things that come to mind. I had a couple of friends who just kind of decided to make themselves my personal wrangler. They just jumped in and, coordinated school supplies for my kids because it was the beginning of August when that had happened, and coordinated, all the food efforts, and literally made themselves my public relations people, and, kind of wouldn't let anybody near me, and fielded all of the questions and stuff. A couple of people that I knew decided, without even really asking, they were just going to mow my lawn, right? Some of my family members just came over and cleaned my house. One of my friends at one point just said, let me take you to a bookstore. We don't need to talk about anything, but let me get you out of the house and just let's be together. So those little kinds of things, those little acts where people were just trying to serve and be with me, were so, so powerful.
That's good to know. I feel like my mother taught me that obviously you want to check in with people, but to just, if you don't know what to do, just do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because sometimes, when you put yourself in the place of the person who has experienced the loss, everything in their life just feels like it exploded. And so sometimes it's a big ask for us to even know how someone can help us. We can't even process what has happened, let alone say, hey, yeah, could you grab me some groceries? But when somebody says, okay, I'm at Walgreens, what do you need? Right? Or they just bring you things or do things for you that they know would be beneficial. You just washed somebody's car. You just, did the thing. I've not met somebody in grief who has gotten mad about that. I'll tell you that.
That's really helpful. And I recognize and you talk about how grieving isn't one size fits all or linear. But
Yeah.
if you have someone who you know is grieving, this is somewhere where I struggle that I'd love your advice on. I feel this intrinsic balance of wanting to check in with them, but also
Mm-hmm.
maybe being like, well, maybe they're just having a day where they're not
Mm.
in their grief and they don't want
Mm.
me to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're just not thinking about it right now, and I'm a bother.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for treading that line of wanting to show up for your loved ones and friends, but not?
I
Yeah.
used to worry about that too until I had the experience on the other side of it. And what I realized is that we're pretty much always thinking about the loss. It's impacted every area of life. And so there really isn't a day that goes by that we aren't thinking about it. But what we often feel is that other people have forgotten. And so even if you're worried that you're going to upset the apple cart, right? And you're just going to remind them of their loss, you can put that worry down, right? They're already thinking about it. And actually it's typically very comforting to know they aren't the only ones thinking about it. So you don't have to ask deep questions, but hey, I mean, a little text message of, hey, I'm thinking of you today. I love you, right? That's huge.
I hope that this is not an insensitive comparison, but I know that one of your podcast episodes is something along the lines of where'd all my friends go?
Mm.
And it kind of reminded me of having a baby, which is a positive life change. And like, oh, everyone's reaching out in that first couple of weeks, like everyone's doing stuff. And then 2 months in, sometimes you're like, whoa.
You're
and
crying in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And yeah, you feel like you're all alone. Yeah, I think there are a lot of parallels, right? Where there is for most people an outpouring of support in the early days. There are meals being brought. There's a lot of, hustle and bustle and activity. And there's some, sort of mourning practices or events that happen depending on the culture. And then there's this period where everybody goes back to their lives. And it's at that point where most people who are the ones still in grief that are just realizing the impact of what has happened, right? They are just now going, oh my gosh, that wasn't a terrible nightmare. It really did happen. My person is actually gone. And so when other people disappear is usually the time when we need them the most, right? But a lot of times, and I used to do this too, you hold back because of thoughts like, well, maybe they're having a good day and I'll just upset them. I'll just bring it back to, the front of their mind, and that will actually not be helpful. And it's just not something we have to worry about. That's really, truly when people need you.
So when people get into grieving, I want to borrow some of your words. You've said many times, and I have to go. You said we suck at grief.
Oh my gosh, we sure do.
Tell us about this. Why do we suck at grief?
Well, there's a few reasons. I think one is that we just don't talk much about it. And so we don't know much about it. And what we do know is actually pretty shallow and a little bit outdated. So most people, if you ask them about grief, will probably tell you that they've heard something about there being 5 stages to grief. And that's about all. And that's really unfortunate because just like, anything in life, there are many grief theories. The 5 stages of grief is one of many theories, but it just kind of happened to catch on, right? And people have misinterpreted that theory so much. So it was originally a study of hospice patients. It was about the process that people were going through as they accepted their own mortality and a terminal diagnosis, right? It was not about what is it like to lose someone. It was about what is it like to come to terms with your own mortality. And it was never meant by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler, who created it. It was never meant to be linear, right? To be, even though they used the term stages, they were not trying to imply that we were supposed to go through denial, right? And then we're supposed to be angry and depression. It wasn't supposed to be this first this, then that, right? Experience. And so, but because we don't know that, we don't talk about it, then what I often find is we're comparing ourselves to something that was never even meant to capture the totality of a grieving experience in the first place. And we're like, well, am I angry enough? Is this the part where I'm supposed to bargain? Am I depressed now? Have I come to acceptance? And it's just like trying to put square pegs in round holes all over the place, right? And not even giving any of the other approaches to grief any consideration. And we also use language, I think, that implies that grief ends. And so we set ourselves up for failure with that because it doesn't. Grief doesn't end, right? Unless, in my the way that I think about grief, it's the natural human response to a perceived loss. Okay. And perceived is really important, a perceived loss, because what one person perceives as a loss is not what another person perceives as a loss. There are many types, subsets of grief. So anticipatory grief, disenfranchised grief, complicated grief. Like we could go down and list all kinds of grief. Nobody knows about any of those. Right. And since we can never take the loss away, we're always going to have thoughts and feelings about it. And thoughts and feelings are really what compromise our entire grief experience. Now they can change over time and we can change them over time. But unless we can go back and travel backwards in time and change what happened, we're not going to end grief. We're going to fold it into the fabric of our lives, right? We're going to integrate it into our lives. We're going to choose how we want to think and feel about what has happened as a part of our life. But we're not going to get to an end. We use like the word journey. It implies there's some destination. There isn't. We also seem to believe that time heals. And we have myths around how much time is supposed to pass and what we're supposed to do after that amount of time passes, right? It's different for everyone, but so often I'll see women really believing that the first year is the hardest and they kind of white knuckle their way through the first year because they tell themselves, well, if time heals and the first year is the hardest, then all I need to do is survive the first year. Well, guess what? Nothing magical happens at the end of year one, right? The clouds do not part and angels do not sing. Like grief is still there. And if we just avoided it all, if we distracted our way through the first year by being super busy or by eating our feelings or drinking our feelings, or, there's a myriad of ways that we can just white knuckle through, then what do we find at the end of year one? Still all the same emotions that are left to be processed. And maybe even a deeper realization that, oh, wow, now it's really real. They aren't coming back. And so, we don't talk about it enough. We don't understand enough about grief theory. We think feelings are problems. We think time heals. We think grief has an end. Just generally speaking, we suck at it. But that's why, conversations like this are ones I'm so excited to have, because people are going to come away from this podcast episode so much more informed, and we're gradually going to suck less.
Okay. I'm with you on that. You had a lot of good things to reflect on and what in your answer there. So I want to rewind just a minute. So part of what you're saying is this kind of 1 year mark, like, well, I'm just going to, force myself through. I know in time I'll feel better, is just arbitrary. That doesn't even mean anything or make sense. Okay. So I just want to recap that because I think that's really important for everyone to understand. I really like how you said that, grief just kind of becomes something that's permanently folded into the fabric of our lives. Sometimes when people's loved one dies, it seems like from afar that, maybe their world just kind of freezes. When you're working with women who maybe are past that initial couple of weeks of just, like you were saying, like high activity, high adrenaline, I would guess, and they're kind of dropping into a little bit more like, okay, this is my reality. What are some meaningful ways that you wish more people knew about to cope in a positive way when a loved one dies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish more people understood how to allow themselves to feel a feeling, which it sounds basic as I say it, but what I've learned through my own experience and through years of coaching is most of us aren't taught how to allow a feeling to pass through us. We just don't know how. We know how to distract ourselves from feelings, right? We know how to avoid them. We know how to wish them away. We know how to react to them and let them fuel our behavior. But we don't actually know how to let them be in our body so that they can be digested. And when we develop that skill, which is always one of the first skills that I'm helping my clients with, then feelings get a lot easier. And part of being a human on the planet and part of being a human in grief is intense feelings, right? And so when we develop that skill and feelings are no longer scary things, because that's what happens a lot of times, is that if you've never had a grief experience and then you have something happen that feels emotionally so intense, it can be really easy to worry that you can't handle it, right? To worry that you're going to fall into this black hole that's going to swallow you, right? And so then you start you can start becoming scared of your own feelings and avoiding them, which just perpetuates the problems because those feelings, they are going to wait for you.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I love this topic. And I think whether it's grief or, other trauma, big or small in our lives, that this is a life skill.
Yeah.
So can you give us an example of a practice that has maybe turned the light switch on for some of your coaching clients? How do you help people feel feelings?
Yeah. So there's two ways that I like to do it. One is a process I call NOW, N-O-W, and it's very simple to remember, a little harder to learn to do. But the N stands for name or notice. And I actually think noticing is more important than naming. So it's, this is anger, right? I notice I feel angry, or I notice my face feels flushed, right? We're noticing what's happening or naming it. Either one is fine. Then we're doing the exact opposite of what we are inclined to do, which is we're going to open. That's what the O stands for, is we're going to open up. So instead of what we're inclined to do, which is to move away from, right? We're going to open up to. And by that, I mean literally giving yourself permission to allow your experience. And that can actually look like physically dropping your shoulders and opening your chest. It can look like breathing it in, right? It's kind of like, for female listeners who have had babies, it's what you're taught to do when you're in labor, right? When you have a labor pain, you are not taught to shut down and wish it away and try to make it go away, because it gets harder. You're taught to breathe it in, let it in, right? Blow it out. Like, we're going to work with it and kind of ride this wave, but we're doing that from a place of openness. So that's the open, the O. And then the W is witness or watch, whatever works for you. And by that, I mean, now we're just going to watch it as it goes through our body. So we're not thinking about what created it, right? We're not thinking about let's say it's sadness. We're not thinking about what is making us sad to create, more sadness. We're noticing our own felt experience of sadness in our body and witnessing it. What is it like for me when sadness is in my body? What part of my body do I notice the sadness in? How do I even know that I'm sad? Does it feel like a hollowness in my stomach? Does it feel like a tightness in my chest? Is it a clamping feeling in my throat? And then more specifically, how much can I notice about it? Does it have a particular speed? Is it more fast or maybe more slow? Does it have a particular shape? How would I describe it? Does it have a texture? Is it smooth or is it spiky? What is it like? Does it have a color? And different things will be easier for certain people. So some people may not resonate with the idea of shapes and colors at all. And other people can tell you, once they put their attention there, almost instantly how they are experiencing that emotion. So then we just watch that experience in our body as it passes through. And for most people, that's about a 90-second experience. If we're actually just, oh, there it is, right? We're naming or noticing it. I notice it. There it is. I'm open to it. It has permission to be here. I'm going to be with it. I'm going to let it be with me. And then we just get super curious and watch it as it goes through our body. We become the witness of our own emotional processing. And that to me is so powerful, and it can be done anywhere. So that's the first thing I teach. And then the other option I love is emotional freedom technique, also called tapping, because it's like instantly creating calm in your nervous system. It's like an off switch for your stress response. And it's so self-honoring, right? You can really just tap and acknowledge how it is that you are feeling. The intention is not to change it. The intention is to be honest about it and let it flow through. And both of those ways to me are really, really powerful.
I'm sure those are going to be helpful things for people to try. And so I'll make sure to capture those in the show notes too. Okay. So another thing that I really want to make sure we get to, I know we're coming up on time, but a lot of people are familiar with post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. But one thing that I loved learning more about your perspective on is called post-traumatic growth. And not everybody is familiar with this. So could you tell us first, let's just define what that is.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it. And it was kind of one of those record scratch moments where you're like, wait, what? What'd they say? Post-traumatic what? Because I too knew about post-traumatic stress disorder, but did not know about post-traumatic growth. So it is a phrase that was coined by two researchers in the mid-90s, last names Tedeschi and Calhoun. And prior to their work, it was thought that following trauma, kind of the best we could hope for was, pre-trauma, we had this baseline level of wellness or life satisfaction. With the trauma, that would decline. And following the trauma, the goal was to get back to that baseline that we had experienced before the trauma, right? We were going to bounce back. But these two researchers started noticing that some people, after something traumatic, and again, trauma is very subjective. We could have a whole discussion about that, right, too. But some people are actually experiencing deeper levels of life satisfaction, more meaning, greater levels of happiness after a trauma. Why is that? And so that's the idea of post-traumatic growth. We can take a loss and we can bounce back, and that's fine. And also, if we want, we can bounce forward, right? I like thinking of it like if a tornado comes and knocks your house down. I know that since we both live in the Midwest, you can relate, right? That happens. Tornadoes come and they knock your house down. And you could just rebuild the same house that you had before on that property. There would be nothing wrong with that, right? It's not a morality issue. Also, though, having lived in that house for a while, you probably learned some things. You probably learned some things having lived there, that maybe you would really like your kitchen to be in a slightly different, design. Maybe you would like more outlets. Maybe you would like more natural light, right? You've learned some things by living in that house. And so you could also take the opportunity to redesign your house and make it even more aligned with what you want and what you've learned. Is building a new house and redesigning it a commentary on the old house? No. And this is where people get stuck, right? We think, well, what if I'm even happier, if I'm living a life that's even more aligned with what I want going forward, what does that mean about my spouse? What does that mean about my loss? Did I not love them enough? We make it mean all these unhelpful things. So post-traumatic growth is just the idea that you can actually take what you've learned over anything that happens to you and create a life that's even more of what you want because of the trauma, not in spite of it.
I'm taking that all in. So even if you go through an experience, which you'd never want to wish on anybody,
right?
Sometimes the light cracks open, you might step into something that's even more powerful and more meaningful than you might. Yeah,
you might decide it's what you want, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to be happy that the event happened. But I'll give you an example for me. I went, okay, wait a minute. I'm 40. Okay, if life is this short, am I doing what I want to do? Am I making the mark that I want to make on this world? No offense to my former coworkers and my former employer. Love them. It wasn't bad, but it was like a wake-up call for me where I went, okay, this is good, but what would be great? And so no insult to my prior life or prior choices, just an opportunity for me to reassess. What do I value and what do I want more of, less of in my life? And then I make choices accordingly.
That's a good place to end, because I just feel like discussion of post-traumatic growth is a hopeful invitation.
Yes, I hope it is. Yeah.
So I always end my podcast with the same question, and that's what's one question women should be asking themselves more?
Oh my gosh, there's so many great answers to that. Yeah, here's what's been on my mind lately. If what you're doing is truly a gift that you're giving yourself, right? And so I've been thinking about this in terms of just every choice that you make. If a choice that you make is a gift that you're giving yourself, what would that open up for you? Right? Like I think about my business, for example. If it's something I'm doing for me, what does that open up for me? And for me, it opens up a lot.
Love that. Thank you so much. I want people to find you. This is a hard topic for a lot of people to talk about with others, and you are a lighthouse. Thank you for sharing. Tell us where the best place to follow you and learn more is.
Yeah. So if they're podcast listeners, the Widowed Mom podcast, I know it sounds a little specific, but it's actually quite valuable for anybody interested in grief or post-traumatic growth. And then coachingwithkrista.com is where all of my, connections live. I do have a free course on that webpage that people can go to. I also have a podcast quiz that people can take, and I'll send you the link to that. It's for some reason not right on the top of my mind. I think it's coachingwithkrista.com/podcast quiz. I'll tell you what it is.
All right.
But they can take that and it will give them episodes that might be uniquely valuable to them based on where they are in grief.
What a great resource. We'll make sure to capture those. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you joined me today. If you're looking for more, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at @WhitneyWoman. And if you enjoyed the show, I invite you to support me by leaving a review or sharing it with a friend. Hope you have an inspired day.